Hi there, it's Matt Heffernan. Welcome back to my series on the XCI tutorial. If you haven't gone and seen the rest of this tutorial, I'd recommend going back to that first episode or perhaps even the larger XCI game development overview video. Uh, if you would do that, you would see where we are in this and it would make a lot more sense. But we'll just push on right now and talk about how we create menus for the XCI Adventure Game Engine. Now, like a lot of games, you're going to want to have a menu. Now, XCI forces you to have this menu bar up at the top because you need to be able to uh, at least start a new game. Nothing works unless you have a menu and have an option in that menu to start the new game to actually get going. So we're going to talk about all the different components of the menu, how the menu file configuration works, and just take the template that comes with the XCI repository, and you can, if you're going to build something from scratch or build something based on the example game that's packed in, what we're going to actually do here is sort of combine the two. We're going to be copying stuff from the example game into the template to just sort of still go from scratch, but do a little bit of borrowing here and there, which is all in good fun because everything we have here in this repository is open source, and if somebody else is giving you open source graphics or whatever, by all means go ahead and use it. That's why we're doing this sort of thing. So here in our first slide we see a basic overview of what is in the XCI menu system. Basically we have a top and bottom parts of the menu. The actual menu itself is something that comes off the menu bar at the top. Here we can see an example of a very simple menu where there is just a few options, and we only have in the menu bar two different menus defined, a file menu and a help menu. And here we see the file menu drop down and the options that are in that. And then down here at the bottom, we see the toolbar popped up. Now, if you've seen the example game, some of the videos for that, you can go back on my channel and see all of that. You'll see how the toolbar gets used in the game. It's very similar to a lot of other games using engines like SCI and SCUM, where you can pop up a toolbar to do specific actions. But like the SCI engine, XCI will also have context-sensitive capabilities. So basically, wherever you're hovering your mouse cursor, there's going to be a default action so that you don't have to go select the toolbar to the thing that you most generally need to do with a particular area. So let's get a little further down and to show how we define the look and feel of this. So we can see here that there are several keys that are in the menu file. If we take a look here at the documentation online, here's the main README file. Now, as you might have seen from the previous episodes, the main documentation is very conversational, comprehensive exploration of the entire game engine and the software development kit. And in the menu file portion, I get into the example menu file and talk all about how that was built and what all these different keys mean in here. If you go into the XCI syntax documentation, I go key by key and define exactly how each of those are supposed to be formatted. And so we can take a quick look here and see how we are actually using these things in the template. And we'll see here the main.xci points to has a menu XCI key, and that points to menu.xci. So menu.xci is our menu file, and we can see here some of those same keys. So what do these keys mean? Menu BG, menu FG, menu LC. Well, we go back to the slide, and this gives you a nice illustration of what that means. So menu LC, it's left corner of the menu. And then we have menu RC, which is the right corner of the menu bar. And then we can see here for the actual menu headers are defined as text strings, but then all the spaces in between on the menu bar are using menu SP, menu space. So that is just sort of a tile that you can use to space things out. Then you have menu div for a divider in the menu. Basically, it just takes this tile and just repeats that going across the width of the menu. Then we have menu uncheck and menu check for checkbox menu items. The only checkbox items we support at this point are music and sound effects. Turn those on and off. And sound effects aren't even implemented at all, but you can still have the menu item in there and go ahead and toggle that on and off to your heart's content. And then we can see also here within the menus themselves, the same menu SP tile is used for spaces. So that's going to come before or after. And in this case, you'll see that we have, in some cases, we have space tiles that are in the menu text style, which is black and white, and we have then in the default palette, we just have these plain white squares, which end up looking the same. But those are actually two different tiles, and we'll get into that later. And then we can see down here that there are the tool tiles are defined by the tool tiles key. And in this case, we're getting a tile map. And you can see here in the example tool map, we have 16 for each of these different tools to define what their buttons are going to look like. And that's mainly defined by the fact that we have a toolbar height of 4 tiles. So by having 16, they're going to be 4 by 4. So the first 4 are the top row, second, third, and last row. And then we can see here, in fact, I'll make this even a little bigger. If I zoom well into here, you'll be able to see in these cases that actually these this tile and this tile are mirror images of each other. So we're taking this tile and flipping it horizontally. This way we're saving some memory. So we can sort of build some of our user interface elements with these tiles with the purpose of being able to save them. So we can see here we're reusing a bunch. Now we have like this rounded corner tile here, and then we have this sort of interior corner here where it doesn't round on this part. But then, meanwhile, these tiles are both the same, and the same is over here. And then we have these tiles that are like the edge of the toolbar, and here we're in the middle. And then we can see a very interesting savings here with the look tool. We have this one tile for an eye because it's both vertically and horizontally symmetrical. So we just need to have one tile, and we're just flipping it each way horizontally and vertically. So that gives us a little look at how we're defining the tiles based on the keys in the menu file. So let's go take a look here at the default that we have in the template file. So right now we have menu BG and menu FG. That's 1 and 0. Oh wait, those aren't tiles though. Those are actually text style elements. So let's go back to our little slide deck here and talk about text styles before we get any further in there. Now, text styles, we have, that sounds like textiles like a fabric. No, we're talking text styles. I'll have to be less lazy with the way I pronounce that. Now, the actual text tiles in the tile map are based on the ASCII characters. So that is starting with the ASCII space, which is 32 decimal or 20 hex, all the way up to 127 decimal or 7F hex. And that of course is the tilde. You got to have a tilde. How else are you going to have negative values in C? So anyway, I'm sorry, that's not negative values in C. It's negative values in some other language. It's exclamation points. I forgot how to program C. I've been programming XCI for so long now. Language I've created, it's superseded C in my own imagination, even though the actual SDK was written in C. Anyway, here we can see the actual tiles that are mapped to those ASCII values. And just like the default Commander X16 screen, the text tiles are still white on blue, and that's palette offset 0. If you're rendering a text tile with palette offset 0 as a part of an animation in a level or on the title screen, that's what you're going to get. But you can use the other palette offsets to get text in styles that are more conducive for the things that you actually need to do. For instance, in the menu, we've have this default menu where it's black on white for the text. It sort of reads a little better that way for a menu. And that's why we have the menu palette offset. And here we can see which is 11. But we can also call that text style 0. And we can see here in this code of the level, we call out text 0, saying text tile 0, then we see all that text is in there. Just like we see here for these tiles, we see tiles palette 0 and at x, y of 115, and then here's all the decimal values for these ASCII characters, and we can see it print out like that. So how do we define what those colors are? Well, here we see the default palette, which is defined in the palette hex file, and this is the default X16 palette. I haven't modified it for this template, and so we have the palette index 6 for the background and index 1 for the foreground. And basically what we do in each of these special palette offsets, 11 through 14, we can replace those colors with other ones in this default palette, these first 16 colors that are defined. And so we can see here for that first one, for palette offset 11, for which is the menu color, we see menu BG, menu background color is 1. So what we're actually going to do is take from that default palette color 1, which is white, and we're going to place that here into the background slot, which is 6. So we're at this point we've got 2 whites, and we've lost the blue in this palette offset 11. But then menu foreground, we're taking 0, so that's black right here. And now we're going to overwrite the foreground color with 0. So now we're going to have black. So now in the palette, we're going to have both 0 and 1 being black. So what this gives us is in this palette in each palette offset, so whether it's 0 or 11 or whatever, within X16, whatever you have at 0 is, you could define it to be whatever color you want, but it's going to come out transparent if it's anything other than that first palette offset. So you just can go ahead and make that, keep that black, but if we want to have opaque black, so say we have a bitmap in the background, we want to be able to cover it up with black like we do with the menu. So like when we have a drop-down menu, like up here, if there is a bitmap behind it, we don't want to see the bitmap through those little gaps in the letters. We just want to see that nice crisp black on white. So that's why we are using a non-transparent black here in this slot. And then this becomes white, and then we end up with this text style of black and white, which we can then call out in the animation as text 0, or just by default in the menus it's going to be using this palette offset to render all these characters. And then we can see here text 1 BG and text 1 FG. That's text style 1, so when you do a text 1 and then a string, that gets printed using whatever we have in palette offset 12. And just like with the menu foreground and background, I came a little off the rails there. Here we're defining again what those colors are. Now we can see a negative image of the menu text style where the background is 0 and the foreground is 1. So background so using 0, which in the default palette is black, 1 is white. So now rather than having this be black, this will actually remain white. So it won't affect this part. This part will be the same as the default palette and palette offset 0. But in palette offset 12, we will still have 2 blacks, but now 6 will be a black color. And that's just another good thing to keep in mind, that if we wanted to go ahead and have white on black text as tiles within the screen, we could always call out tiles with 12 here instead of 0, and we'd get that color text. And then the same goes with text styles 2 and 3, which are palette offsets 13 and 14. And here we can see for text styles 2 and 3, just like 1, the background color is 0, so we're going to have black getting put here in the 6 slot. And then the 1 slot are going to be other colors from here. So we're going to use 7 here. You can see the yellow, the shade of yellow for textile 2. And then the foreground of textile 3 will be 14, which is this light blue color. And that's what you have by default. So you can use any of these, any of the colors from that default palette to define all 4 of these text styles to be however you like. So let's take a look here at what we have by default. So, like we saw before, we have a menu text background color of white, foreground color of black. Black on white, fine. But we can see here we are using a plain white square for the left corner and the right corner, that same character as the space. Now, of course, that example we saw here, these nice little rounded corners. In fact, they're not hidden here. We can see these nice rounded corners here on the edge. It creates a nice little soft appearance, but here we can see what that default menu looks like here, and it's just white all the way to the end. So if we want to replicate that, we're going to need to copy that tile over. So I've already done that ahead of time. Now we can see here I've made tile 3 that rounded corner, and you'll see here that the rounded corner is just on the right side. And so I sketched it out here in the spreadsheet, and then over here in tiles.hex, I went ahead and implemented it here. So here's those zeros for that transparent black, and then the opaque white here with all the ones. Because for these tiles, unlike the actual text that it's going to be sitting next to, these are going to be using palette offset 0. So we're going to know that 1 is still going to be white and 0 will be transparent, as always. So I want to then take this tile, and pretty much as is, I'm going to be making that the right corner. So I'm going to go ahead and say 3 is that corner. So now we're going to have that nice rounded edge in that far right corner. Now I want to do the same thing in the left corner, but to do that I'm going to have to flip tile 3 horizontally so that I get that sort of curve going this way. So I'll still use 3, but then say 3 horizontally flipped, 3H. And there we go. That's all we'll have to do for that. Now we'll have the same thing with the menu divider, where what we would actually have is, again, this plain white like we have here. We're still defining this tile 1 for the divider. Well, that doesn't look very good either. It just looks like there's just missing space in between the different menu items. Now, of course, dividers are optional, but just to show you what they look like, I went ahead and stole that tile, the menu divider tile from the example game, and so showed it here in the spreadsheet. So we got like a sort of medium gray with a light gray on the top and bottom, creates a little texture. Notice I didn't use black, because if I used black for this, that would come out transparent. I don't want a transparent divider in there. I want it still to be opaque, but since I'm using the default palette, I can't use black there. So I used the next best thing, which is that darker gray. And so then we can see right here, I've done the same thing. So it's using their C for that darker gray, F for the lighter gray, and then the 1s for the white. So that's tile 4. So I'm going to go ahead and change the divider character into 4, the divider tile. And then check and uncheck. And you can see here I did a very silly thing and just had the X and O ASCII characters, which looks kind of stupid. So, but what they're not going to come out like transparent or white on blue, like the default palette would show any of the ASCII characters. The menu check and uncheck, unlike the other tile specifications, actually use that same menu, the menu palette, the palette offset 11. So what I have to do is then define using with that palette offset in mind. So down here, I've created those is tiles 9 and 10. Now you can see here I've got a blue background with a little gray box, and then one has a white X through it. Well, you got to remember we're talking about here menu offset 11, where white in palette offset 0 is going to be black in palette offset 11, and blue is going to be white. So we got to understand that this is actually going to come out white, all the parts that are blue, and the parts that are white are going to come out black. And the gray will stay the same because the gray doesn't change in that. And so we went ahead and changed those tiles here. We'll see there 9 for the unchecked box and 10 for the checked one. We can see those ones going in that X formation. So we're going to go ahead and change that. So the checked one is going to be 10. We won't change the comments in there for now. You get the picture there. See? 10 and then 9 for the unchecked one. And that will give us our basic menu. So if I were to go ahead and run it without rebuilding the game, we'll see what that default can actually look like. So here we go. We go back in there, and if you go back and watch the graphics video, that first episode, you'll see what that was all about. So here's that default menu, and we haven't changed anything. We have those blank spaces for the dividers. If we look at the sound menu, we have just plain X's for that, and there's the O character. And that's pretty much it. We don't have any of this fun stuff that we just created. So now with those changes we just made, we'll rebuild the game and rerun it. And now, you see, we got the rounded corners. We've got these nice dividers happening in here. And we've got these fancier looking check boxes. And just like we saw before here, that this tile, this is horizontally flipped from the way it's supposed to be. That's tile 3 flipped horizontally. So that's just a little basic thing there of how you can sort of create things there for the menu bar itself. But now, how do we define what's actually in the menu? Well, we can see right here we have the menu key that says File. So we're going to have a menu that's called File. And it's going to have new, load. Here's what we'll bring up here. So it has new, load, div. So that's the divider. Save, save as, another divider, exit. So you notice I don't have the actual text for these commands because those are fixed. So when you specify one of these identifiers here, new, load, save, save as, exit, the engine is going to automatically give the canned string that is used for those menu items. So it's consistent across different XCI games. But if, say, we didn't want to have one of those, like we're not really supporting loading and saving, so we're just going to delete those right out of there. So I'll save that up, rebuild the game. Whoops, I built it twice. And now we can see, yep, just new game, exit. That's it. And exit will actually exit. Hey, we're back to the basic prompt. Very nice. So that's how we sort of use, how we define which menu items we have in there. Now, it's a fixed number of menu items that you can have. If we go back to the slides here, we saw all those in there. New, load, save, save as, exit, music, SFX, controls, about, and div. Now we'll talk about the help items in there. The controls and about, that'll be covered in a later video. But for right now, we can see here that we have the controls and about key that point to these text files, and those text files our this tile layout format. I should have opened those. So let me show you the about. As you can see, it's just very basic here. Place about statement here, click to close help. And what that will effectively do is when we do help about, it creates a little box here. Now you can have escaped tiles within this about. Same thing with controls. Controls is just another one, and it's another file that you call out here with the controls key, controls.txt. So we can see here controls.txt, we don't have much, but you can populate this with all sorts of different tiles and text, and it's a very quick way of just laying out a bunch of tiles, and we'll get into that in another video, because that'll be sort of a nice little grab bag thing to do. And let me go back here to the menu file. So that's how we define what's in there. And if you look at the slide, you can see here how each of those menu items gets rendered on there, and that we have the special cases of music and SFX where we have menu check, menu uncheck tiles preceding those actual strings, where in the rest of them you're going to have that menu SP, that space tile, to the left of all of these strings. And then, of course, the menu item, which is just div, you can have as many of those as you want in any menu, and it's just going to be just putting those div tiles into the menu. So we're going to move on now to the toolbar. So that's that bottom part, and we can see within XCI we have two different kinds of tools that are supported. The first kind are the user interface controls, the main one being inventory. So like in many adventure games, you can have an inventory, and the whole way that you define and manage an inventory, that's going to be a whole nother video. So meanwhile, we're just going to show that yes, one of the kind of tools that you can have in your game is an inventory, and then another one is a pin, where you can, if we look up here, we see this little pin. It's like a push pin, push down. You can do that to keep your toolbar up. And if that makes sense for your game, to have the toolbar up where you have a lot of locations on the screen that can be have a lot of different interactions that you need to be able to cycle through rather than just depending on the default, and you don't mind having your text field covered up during that, maybe you want to have the ability to sort of keep that up so that the toolbar doesn't keep disappearing every time you move the mouse out, which will happen if you have the pin unpinned. But that's what the pin is for. And here we can see the inventory tool is the first one here. We've made a little suitcase button for that. Now the rest here in the middle are from the example game are the main action tools that you can do, and those action tools cause triggers. And now these are really arbitrary distinctions. You can make any of these triggers do whatever you want, but what the engine gives you is the ability to define 6 different kinds of triggers, so that when you click on an item, when you click on any given tile area within a level, you can trigger it in 6 different ways, just based on these tool triggers. But then of course there's also inventory triggers, so every item in your inventory can also be used. But inventory triggers aren't default. The regular tool triggers are the default. So you can have walk and run be used for actually moving an avatar across the screen. That's sort of the suggested purpose, because a lot of games would do that, but there's no reason why you can't make all 6 of these do whatever you want. Like Scum games, for instance, had taste. If you want to have taste instead of run, by all means, make taste run. But these identifiers are what are used throughout the code of your XCI configuration. And if we take a look here, we can define in the menu file which tools we support. Now by default, the toolbar only has a single tool in it, which is the inventory tool. And for the tiles, it just puts up a dumb ASCII inventory. Just the word inventory is going to pop up. Now the tiles also are forced to use the default palette offset. You're not going to have it look nice. It's going to be those white on blue ASCII characters. So if we do that, here, let me Click that away. Now we go down here and we can see, yep, there's our toolbar. It's just inventory. That's all it says. And then we can click on that, and then we see here very rudimentary inventory control. Again, that'll be another video. We'll get into how we define that. But here we go, back to the main toolbar. It just says inventory. So we can make that a little better. And let's say that we also want to have the use tool, because use is pretty commonly used. If you saw my example game, use is the default action for a lot of things. It's sort of the catch-all tool. So I'm going to go ahead and add tool use, but I need to have tiles for that. So what I did, if I go back to the spreadsheet here, we'll see here I created this 16 by 16 tile right here of a hand. And the hand is sort of the universal use symbol. Like if we look up here at the example game here, I've got this nice hand. Of course, it's a different hand. That's a left hand, maybe a little more sinister than just having a friendly right hand. And just to match the aesthetic of what we see with inventory, I'm going to go ahead and make this also white on blue, just to be matchy-matchy. And we can see here I've defined 4 tiles here, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and just laying them out like this, 5 and 6 for the top row, 7 and 8 for the bottom row, and that creates this nice little hand. And again, we look at here at 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the tiles.hex, and we can see here all the 1s and 6s for the whites on the blues. And we're going to go ahead and just do that, say 5, 6, 7, 8 for tool tiles. But you'll notice here in the toolbar definition we have the TBDIM key, which is toolbar dimensions. And 9 by 1 is not going to cut it anymore, because 9 is how many characters are in inventory. So we don't really need to have the whole word inventory. We can just tighten that up to just be INV. But we still need it to be taller. So we're going to add another row of tiles to go on top. So let's use some of the tiles that we've already added. Like we have that rounded edge like we use for the left corner. So we'll have the left corner of the toolbar be the same. So we'll have a 3H for tile 3 horizontally flipped. And then we'll put a couple of just the plain white squares, which is 1 here, like we used for the space. So we'll have that corner with a couple of white squares, and then we'll have that INV below it. And that makes just slightly less disgusting to look at. So now we're going to have a 3 wide and 2 tall inventory button, and then a 2 by 2 use button. So that means we're going to be 5 wide and 2 high. And that's how we know here that these little tool maps, since we're tool tile maps, since we have a dimension height of 2, we know that this is going to be split up evenly by that number. So we are going to have something evenly divisible by 2 for those tool tiles. So we got 6 tiles. That means we're going to have something that's 3 wide and 2 high. With 4 tiles, divide that evenly by 2, so we're going to have a 2 by 2 button. So yeah, unlike the example game, you don't have to have everything be samey. You can have every button on that toolbar be whatever width you want, but everything's going to have to be the same height, just to not make it look incredibly stupid. I'm not gonna let you make your game look quite as bad as you may be lazy to allow it to be. So let's go ahead and rebuild and run it again. That intro screen is pretty good. Now let's go down here. Now you can see what we did. There's now just inv with the little rounded corner like we wanted, those plain ones, and so we still have that whole this whole 2 by 3 area now is the button for inv, and there we're bringing up the inventory. But now we have this nice 2 by 2 button for use. But you'll notice here the mouse cursor doesn't change. If you saw the example game video, we created a special mouse cursor for each of those tool actions. So let's actually define that. Now those are defined down here. We can see those those same identifiers that are used for these tool keys, like here tool use, and you have tool walk and tool run that we're not dealing with. So here we can see we're defining the default cursor for all of the different actions, and in fact in our toolbar only use is ever going to happen. So we can define now a custom cursor for using, so that then when we have a context switch to be having the mouse cursor over a thing that we can use, it'll go ahead and change to that automatically. So let's take a look at something that I created for that. Oh, I may have to pause here just a second. All right, and we're back there. I think my daughter wanted to make a bit of a cameo appearance, and I think she's gone back to sleep. So here we look back at the spreadsheet, and we can see, remember we created a couple of sprites before. We have, of course, the one that comes with the template, which is your default mouse cursor, which has to be in frame 0. Because that's what we've defined default cursor to be. Of course, you can place it anywhere, but you definitely want to have at least something that looks like a mouse cursor to not totally confuse your users. And of course, you can redesign that to be whatever you want it to be. Then we created this little weird Pokemon-like sprite, and now here we've created a third sprite frame 2, to be the use cursor, and we've basically used that same sort of hand design, but gave it a little dimensionality, gave it a little gray on white look, just like the default cursor, and then with a little tiny arrowhead in the corner, because like with the default mouse cursor, the business end is that upper left corner, and that's what you're really clicking on. So what we'll do is go back into the menu file and change the use cursor to be frame number 2 now. And that's it. So we'll go ahead, we got to kill that. All right, we'll rebuild one more time. And there's our little Pokemon friend again. All right, looking down here, there's that fun toolbar, and now, now we've got that use cursor, and we could use something. Or if we don't want to use something, we want to go back in the inventory, and there we go, we've gone back to the default cursor. And we can go ahead and exit back out again. Oh, see that basic prompt. Isn't that fun? And I think that's about it, right? Who am I talking to? I'm just talking to myself. Yeah, we've gone through all the tools. We've gone through all the different things that are in that menu file. So again, you're going to want to go back, look at the README file. There's a whole section on that menu file. I go over in a lot of detail of just talking through all the different things that I've had in this video here, getting into what things are really sort of optional and some of the greater meanings. So this gives you all the semantics of what's in the menu file, and then here this part of the syntax gives you the syntax of each of these instructions, all the different keys that you can find in the menu file. And you'll see here a lot of those ones that we saw here: menu check, menu uncheck, menu controls, about. And yeah, so you can see we get into the details of how each of those are defined. Yep. So you can see there's a bunch of them there, and that's it. So you can see all of these saying, yep, they're found in the menu file, and you can get all the excruciating detail you could ever want, but you go ahead and clone or fork the repository for XCI. The link will be down in the description, and you'll get all of this stuff. You'll get the example game, you'll get the software development kit, you'll get the engine itself. We've got beta release 0.2 is out there right now. It's looking pretty good. It's working pretty good, but I still need beta testers, people to sort of like poke at it, create their own sort of mini games, at least for now, or just to go ahead and get started on a bigger game and give it a try. Let me know if you find any issues with the engine or any of the documentation or anything. Please don't hesitate to place a bug report, an issue on GitHub. And there you'll get, again, all that documentation. You'll get this very slide deck will be in there, and you'll get all the wonderful things that you'll ever need. So by all means, hit me up there on GitHub. You can see here I'm Slithy Matt. And there's the X16 XCI repository. 2 releases in, and we're looking good. So I thank you for watching this video. I'm thinking this is a little longer than some of the previous ones in this series, but there's a lot to unpack here for each of these different parts of building the game. And I hope this is helping to inspire and maybe kickstart you into getting into some game development and bringing back these great adventure games of the past. So I thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and all that good stuff. Thanks. Bye-bye.